Hey, this is Matt. I got a little bit of a video planned out for you. I'm going to be hopefully briefly going over the tube layout for a Hughes Kettner Triamp Mark II. As you can see, there's quite a few tubes in this amplifier. There's 9 preamp tubes and 4 power tubes, which makes 13 total. It's been a long process for me trying to figure out all this stuff and doing my research and just experimenting with different tubes in different positions. You can check out my other videos on my channel for different tube comparisons. But I wanted to make a video because there's not a lot of footage of this amp on YouTube with at least the technical aspects of it with the valve stuff. So if you're looking to do anything with power tubes, be sure to check out my video on my power tube comparison. And I made a really quick video of me biasing this amp with my E34L power tubes from JJ. So be sure to check that out if you have any questions or concerns about how to bias one of these things. This has been a huge learning curve for me, so just a little bit of a disclaimer before I start. This is a little bit of a complicated tube layout, so if at any point you get confused, make sure you look at the description below. I'm going to be typing up a chart of each valve position and what it does in there, so be sure to look at that as you're watching this video. Hopefully that will give you some clarity, and hopefully what I say isn't really convoluted or confusing, because this has been a really tough video to shoot so far. But basically we're starting from over here, V1 all the way to V8 in order, and then V9 right here, and then that tube leads into the power tubes, which I removed for the sake of visibility. V1 here is going to be controlling amps 1 and 2. So V1, as you know, in pretty much every tube amplifier, this is pretty much always the first tube that every single channel is going to see. It's going to go through this first tube here. In amp 3 of this amplifier, there's a little bit of an exception, and I'll get to that. So V1 is going to be the first tube for amps 1 and 2. So it's the first 4 channels of this amplifier are going to see V1. Okay, I'm going to skip over actually to V3 because this is actually how the circuit goes, which is kind of funny. So V3 is going to control specifically amp 1. So this valve right here is going to affect channels 1A and 1B. And then V2 is going to affect channel 1B only. So if you switch to channel 1A, with your clean channel, you're going to see V1 and then V3. If you go to 1B, you're going to be going from V1 to V3 and then to V2. So V2 is going to be specific to 1B only. So if you're looking to affect the tone of 1B only and not affect your clean channel, you're going to want to mess with this tube. But because it's the third tube in the chain, this is probably going to affect it the least. So if you're willing to compromise, you might want to try messing around with V2 if you don't really care about how your clean channel, if you don't mind your clean channel being affected by this position. I have selected for my V1 a Telefunken ECC83 gold pin. This tube is about $50, but honestly, if you're looking for clarity and quality, this tube is not going to disappoint, especially for a V1 position. This thing puts out a really, really nice tone. It's crisp, it's clear, and I've tried a lot of V1, or a lot of different tubes for V1, and this amplifier in this tube is by far the best because it just puts out such a nice tone quality. So that tube is definitely not going anywhere. I use long plate tubes for V2 and V3 in this amp because I want amp 1 to be pretty chimey on the high end. I like to get a little bit more of that Vox sound in my dirty clean channels, so that's why I have the long plate tubes in here. The V3 is I have a JJ ECC 803S, the long plate. The standard pin, you notice I have the same tube over here, but it's a gold pin. I'm actually looking to switch this out with the standard pin because the gold pins tend to smooth up the distortion a little bit too much for the dirty clean channels. So they're not quite as chimey, and honestly, when the distortion starts to get smoothed up, it almost actually muffles it, and I don't really like it as much. But this combination right here for me has been really, really awesome for amp 1. So moving on to V4. V4 is going to affect channels, or excuse me, amps 2 and 3. So V4 is not going to see anything before amp 2. So if you're switching to amp 2, you've gone from V1 to V4. So amp 2 is going to go from V1 to V4, and then V4 is actually technically sort of a V1 for amp 3. So I'll get to that in a second. That's why I said that V1, not every single amp is going to have V1 affect all the channels. In this case, amp 3 specifically, the first tube amp 3 is going to see is valve position 4. So V4 affects channels, amps 2 and 3. I keep getting that backwards. I have in that position a Genelex Gold Lion B759 gold pin. It's a short plate. This is another one of those high dollar tubes. It's about $45-50. This tube is really, really unique in its tone character. There's a lot of really, really nice mid-range in this tube. It's a little bit relaxed on the high end. I used to have it in my phase inverter position, and I took it out because it kind of dulled like all of my clean channels and stuff, and I really, really liked it, wanted to hang on to it, so it eventually went in my V4 position. So that tube is driving all my higher gain channels, and it's a really good V1 for that position. V5 is going to affect amp 2 only. So this V5 position is only going to affect channels 2A and 2B. So if you switch to amp 2, channel 2A or 2B, you're going to first see valve 1, then you're going to see valve 4, and then you're going to see valve 5. So if you're looking to try to adjust your tone in amp 2 only, you're going to want to probably mess around with V5. Because if you go anything sooner, you're going to end up interfering with other channels, unless that's kind of what you want. But you're going to have to, like I said, I've done a lot of experimenting, so it's been fun, but it's kind of been kind of confusing and frustrating, to be honest. And in V5, I have a couple of these tubes in here, and these tubes are pretty unique in their own respect as well. It's a Mullard CV 4004. This tube is a little bit more aggressive sounding in the high end. The breakup is a little bit more... Yeah, I don't know what the right word is on it, but it's just really... It's smooth, but it's really aggressive, and I really like it. Especially after the Genelex, like this kind of takes that really nice round warm mid-range and just kind of like makes it a little bit more aggressive. And it's this tube has a character of its own. I would check out that tube if you haven't yet. They're pretty awesome. So we get V6, 7, and 8 are going to be dealing with more specifically amp 3. V6 is your position for specifically channel 3A. So if you switch to channel 3A, you're going to be running first through V4, and then through V6, and then to your phase inverter. So 3A only has just those couple of tubes. And then channel 3B, which is the very last channel of channel 6, you're going to be running through valves 7 and 8. So valves 7 and 8 are specific to 3B. So if you switch to channel 3B, then you're going to be running valve position 4, 7, 8, and then your phase inverter tube. And that is pretty much it. The phase inverter is the last tube. every single channel on your amp sees the phase inverter tube. So I like to use the phase inverter tube as sort of like the same way I view the power tubes. It's kind of a way for me to adjust the flavor of the amplifier without having to mess with the power tubes, because this amp is a little bit of a chore to take apart and rebias every time I want to put different power tubes in there. I have like 4 or 5 sets of power tubes that I like to jump back and forth in between in this amp. Still haven't settled on the ones that I'm gonna probably go with long term. I'm looking at the 68.7s right now because they sound so good. But I have a tongue saw in this position because the Gentle X adds so much mid-range. I really like it so much that I had to have it in this position. But the tongue saw is a little bit more of a mid-scooped sound. So the tongue saw actually gives it a nice mid-scoop, the whole amp a nice mid-scoop sound, kind of combating the amount of mid-range that the Gentle X puts out. So this tube I kind of use as like a mastering sort of thing. If you're going to replace this tube, make sure you get the tube with balanced, I think it's balanced triodes, because I can't remember exactly why, but if you run your amp at quieter volumes, it's not a big deal if you have an unbalanced tube. But if you run your amp at like super high volumes and run into like a dummy load or something, you're more likely to hear a tone difference with an unbalanced tube versus a balanced one. So just when in doubt, just get a balanced tube and put in there and try to keep track of that tube. So hopefully this video helps you out a little bit, and hopefully some of the tubes in here give you a suggestion. This is the tube layout of my amplifier that I'm working with so far. I think it's a really, really good setup. It's the best setup I've had yet. I don't think I said anything on this before, but I run a Mullard CV 4004 in the V7, which is channel 3B, and then V6 and V8 are just JJ ECC 83 gold pins, the short plate tubes, and those are pretty much my go-to high gain tubes because they're such smooth sounding tubes. So yeah, thanks for watching, and like I said, if you have any questions, if this was any sort of confusing for you at all, leave me a comment and I will try to get back to you and answer any questions. This information is sort of officially unofficial. Like I said, I've called around places and tried to get some research done, and to the best of my knowledge, everything that everyone's told me on this layout has affected the sound of each channel and what I was told it was going to affect. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching.